Have you checked the children? What an insane way to mess with somebody. Let's get into it. Hey, welcome back to my channel. And today the film we are going to talk about is When a Stranger Calls. This film was released October 26th of 1979. It's rated R, hour and 37 minutes long, had a budget of $1.5 million, and upon release that year, it made 21. So this had a healthy return on investment. This film, actually, the genesis for this film, it actually started off as a short film. Fred Walton directed a short film called The Sitter, which is basically the first 20 minutes of this film. Having thought that it would make a terrific feature-length film, they expanded the script, and we got our movie When a Stranger Calls. This was Fred Walton's first theatrical film. Now, Fred Walton over the years had done, he did some TV, but he also went on to do another horror film, April Fool's Day, which is a pretty damn good slasher film, kind of, if you've never seen it. And then he went on to do a sequel to this film, When a Stranger Calls Back, in '93. And he was also up for directing Halloween 6, The Curse of Michael Myers. Obviously, he did not get that film, but he was up for it. And he hasn't directed anything in a while. But Fred Walton has directed a few good films over the years, and this is one of them. Especially the first 20 minutes. Let's get into it a little bit. Carol Kane plays Jill. She's our main babysitter at the beginning of this film. Charles Durning's in this film. I spoke about him, Night of the Scarecrow. He was in that film. He's fantastic in this movie as well. He plays John. He's a police officer, and being in the film later on, he plays a private detective. And Tony Burke Beckley plays Kurt Duncan. He is our psychopath. And being in this film, Carol Kane's character Jill shows up at this house. She's going to babysit these people's children for the evening. When she arrives, the parents tell her that the kids are sleeping. They haven't been feeling well. All she has to do is listen for them and just hang out downstairs. That's all she has to do. No problem. Piece of cake, right? Now, we don't know how old Jill is. They don't really go into that. I don't think. I just watched this last night. I don't remember them saying her age. She's either high school or early college years. And she's kind of doing some homework, and she's on the phone with her friend. And all of a sudden, she starts getting these phone calls. And all this guy says is, have you checked the children? Click. And the phone calls keep coming, and every so often, every like 15, 20 minutes, keeps calling, saying the same thing, have you checked the children? This starts getting to Jill. And so she decides to call the police, and they tell her what this guy is doing. And the police kind of like, there's not much we can do as long as the doors are locked. There's patrols in that area. I wouldn't worry about it. You'll be fine. Well, the calls continue, and this is Jill's starting to get more and more freaked out. So she calls the police back and says, look, you got to do something. This guy's watching me. I know it. And the cop's like, well, how do you know that? She goes, trust me. I know he's watching me. So they decide, well, next time he calls, I'm going to call the phone company. We're going to try to trace the call, see where he's calling from so we can get this guy. She goes, okay. Well, she gets another phone call, and she keeps him on the line for about a minute or two. She keeps him on the line. And she's really upset by the end of this phone call because he tells her that he wants to see her blood all over his body. That's what he says to her, which is a very disturbing thing to say to somebody, especially a single young lady like that at a house by herself with just children upstairs. So she slams the phone down. The phone rings again. She picks up and screams, and it's the police officer calling her back. He goes, ma'am, it's Sergeant whatever. The calls are coming from inside the house. And the look on her face, like all emotion, her eyes get wide and all the emotion drops. She gets quiet for a second, and the cop's like, get out of the house. We have a car coming to you right now. And she puts the phone down, and she goes for the door. And as soon as her hand touches the door handle, she looks up the steps, and she can see the light coming from a door opening upstairs. And she unlocks it, and she goes to pull it open, but the chain lock's still on. And you start hearing footsteps, and she gets the chain lock off, opens the door, and it zooms in on Charles Durning's face. He's a police officer, and it cuts to black. We cut to the police talking, and we find out that the kids are mutilated upstairs, and they apprehended this guy. And the parents are there, and it seems like the kids have been dead for a while, actually, before he even started calling her, it seems like, the way they're talking. And that is the beginning of When a Stranger Calls. The opening 20 minutes of this film are masterful, suspenseful filmmaking. It's one of the best opening scenes of a horror movie of all time. I have no problem saying that. Fred Walton knocks it out of the park. Unfortunately, what follows it is not as interesting and is not as suspenseful. What happens is we find out Charles Durning's character, who was a police officer, is not a police officer anymore. He's a private detective. He gets hired because Kurt Duncan, the killer of these two children, escaped from the mental institution. This is 7 years later, 7 years in the future. And he gets hired to track him down. And pretty much his plan is he's going to kill him if he catches him. Because in his mind, this man cannot be allowed to walk amongst us. And because everybody agrees that he shouldn't have been able to plead insanity. They should have given him the chair, and they didn't. And he went to a mental institution, and he broke out. And now he's going to kill him if he finds him. So he's tasked with finding him. Now, this is the part of the movie. First 20 minutes is spectacular. Suspenseful, well-acted, fabulously directed. It's grade A stuff. Absolutely. It's frightening. Now we get to the part where we see our killer, because in the first 20 minutes we don't see his face at all. We just hear his voice. We see our killer. He's very unassuming, although most serial killers are not big jack dudes who you think can really hurt you. This guy's very thin, British dude, looks weak, honestly, and he's wandering the streets in his clothes, and he goes to this bar, and he becomes infatuated with this woman there, and he follows her home, and he begins to stalk her. Well, Charles Durning character figures this out and goes to her for help, and they kind of set up this thing. They don't catch him. He does break into her apartment and wait for her, and he accosts her, but he gets away. He doesn't hurt her. And then all of a sudden, I'm going to fast forward a little bit, because the middle part of this movie is it's not as interesting. Charles Durning's great, and the scenes are okay, but compared to the first 20 minutes, which are so spectacular and so suspenseful and well shot, and not that the middle part isn't well shot, it's not as interesting. It really isn't. Once you see the killer's face and you see what he looks like, and no killing happens during the middle part of this film. None at all. So it's just meanders a bit, and it kind of drags the film down a little bit. Like I said, Charles Durning, the acting's great. It's not as interesting. Now we get to our final 15 minutes of the film, or final 20 minutes of the film. We're reintroduced to Jill. She's married and has 2 kids of her own at home. Now, the last 20 minutes is pretty damn good, too. It picks up steam at the end, but there are problems that I'm going to get into. Her husband and her are going out for the night for an anniversary dinner or promotional. I don't remember what it's for. They're celebrating something. They're going out for dinner. So they have a babysitter watching their kids. They go to the restaurant, and at the restaurant, they get a phone call. Jill decides to take the phone call out the front desk, and it comes racing back to her because he says, "Have you checked the children?" And the look on her face, she just starts screaming. And her husband comes over. They call the cops. The cops go to the house. They can't get a hold of they get a hold of the babysitter, and the phone goes dead, so they think there's something wrong. So they fly home. Kids are fine, but the cops are aware now that he is broken out, and they're going to kind of keep an eye on their house. Meanwhile, Charles Durning, who's feeling defeated because he hasn't caught this guy yet, he came close a time or two, but didn't catch him. And he gets a tip from his buddy that still works for the police department that they might be... It all happens so fast. It's so rushed, the ending. And I wish we would have cut out some in the middle part and got back to Jill. But we'll get into that in a minute. So they go home for the night, and she's freaked out. And her husband's like, "Look, I got a shotgun. You know I'm a good shot. Well, I am a light sleeper. We'll be fine." Well, she can't sleep. She goes downstairs, and all of a sudden, she starts getting this weird feeling. So she goes up and checks the children. They're okay. She goes back to her bedroom, and she sits in bed, and the closet door is slightly open, and all of a sudden you hear somebody talking, which sounds like our killer. And she starts getting freaked out. She rolls over to touch her husband, and it's not her husband, it's the killer. And she jumps out of bed, and he goes after her, and Charles Durning shows up, shoots him. Killer's dead. Her husband's still alive in the closet. He was just knocked unconscious, and that is when a stranger calls. Now, this movie, for the first 20 minutes, this movie is grade A horror. It's phenomenal. It's absolutely stunning how great this opening sequence is. And they paid Kevin Williamson and Wes Craven paid tribute to this opening in Scream. Scream's opening scene, which is fantastic, they changed some things up, but it's pretty much the beginning of When a Stranger Calls, if you think about it. It really is. Only she's not babysitting, she's just home by herself. It's basically an homage to the beginning of When a Stranger Calls. Fabulous. I'm not counting it. I love the beginning of Scream, but that's basically what that is. And Kevin Williams even said, "I pay tribute to When a Stranger Calls." The problem is the middle section. Like, again, the acting is great. It's well shot. It's just not as interesting. It slows the movie down. I think if they would have showed that a little bit, showing this guy's how crazy he really is, and then going back to Jill sooner, and then instead of waiting till the last 15 minutes, and then it's rushed, I think it would have been a way better film. Like, this would be top 10 horror films, but they don't. They dick around to stuff, It's not as interesting, and then the ending feels so rushed. And then here's the other question about the ending. This is the 70s. How the hell did he know what restaurant they were eating at, number one, and where she lives now? Sure, she still lives in the LA area where they filmed this, but 7 years later, there is no... You can't go online and find somebody. You can have a number that you can't find who lives there, like, where they live or anything, an unregistered number. How the hell did he find him so quick? Like, it happens so fast. They don't set it up at all. Like, he knows where she is at this restaurant. He knows where she lives, and that's the end of the film. So a couple things don't make sense as they're rushed to get to this ending, which, although admittedly the ending is way better than the middle section of the film. But still, it's a damn good horror film. Now, there was a remake to this film in 2006. I saw it in the theaters, actually. I do own it on DVD. I never upgraded it. It's okay. The original movie's better. The first 20 minutes of the original movie, you can't top that. But the remake's not too bad for a PG-13 movie. I mean, obviously, this film is based on an urban legend, The Babysitter and the Man Upstairs. I have a book of urban legends, and this is one of them. It's in it. And obviously, they referenced that urban legend in Urban Legends, the movie. But overall, this film is still a hell of a good time. But you could see where the idea for this awesome short film, which I'm sure was spectacular, I never saw it, and they put it in here and it's awesome as well, but they didn't have enough to make the movie that interesting. I think they spent too much time with this killer just meandering around the streets of LA, becoming infatuated with this woman. Nothing really happens other than him being creepy and Charles Durning trying to find him. And then we have our rushed last 15 minutes of the film. But still, because of the great points, the first 20 minutes and the last 15 minutes, I'm still going to give it an 8 out of 10. Those parts are masterful. They're awesome horror. It's an awesome horror scenes right there, and there's stuff of nightmare. It's fantastic. Yes, the middle of the movie brings it down a little bit, but still an 8 out of 10 for a movie that's very good. It's unfortunate they couldn't have came up with a more interesting middle section of the film. But it's still a hell of a good film. If you've never seen it, check it out. When a Stranger Calls from 1979. Have you seen this film? If you have, leave a comment down below. Let me know. Hit the thumbs up. Hit the subscribe button. Share this video. I'd greatly appreciate it. I will be back next time with, I don't know yet what I'm going to do. I'll let you know. But have a great day. Take care of yourselves, and I'll be back soon. Thanks. Bye.